Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Truckers Podcast, FYI, Conversations Without Barriers. I'm your host, Doug from Ontario, Canada. I'm trying something new today, doing a YouTube video at the same time as doing live on Podbean on the Truckers Podcast, FYI, Conversations Without Barriers. Never tried this before. Hopefully you can hear me on YouTube and hopefully you can hear me on Podbean. How is your week going? I hope it's going really well for you. My week is okay. But I wanted to just discuss a little bit about voices for change, challenging racism and discrimination. And racism and discriminations are deeply entrenched issues that continue to affect lives in profound ways. Recently, an incident has brought these realities to the forefront once again, a stark reminder of the work that still needs to be done. I want to share my thoughts on this matter and explore how we can rise above hatred and prejudice to build a more inclusive and compassionate society. This approach is empathetic and compelling, and it sets a thoughtful tone for my message. Imagine walking into a room where you're judged not for your words, your actions, or your dreams, but simply for the color of your skin, the language you speak, or the way you look. This isn't just someone's story, it's a reality for many. And I want to talk about an incident that brought this truth into the sharp focus and why we cannot afford to stay silent in a world striving for equality. Now, this was stemming back probably a couple weeks ago in the Greater Toronto area, where an individual sitting in a public place, studying, and another individual verbally attacking this individual, using profound language, and trying to set fire to the individual's hijab. And of course, back in 2021 here in London, Ontario, where I reside, where an individual deliberately ran over and killed 4 members of a family and injuring a boy. Discrimination remain heartbreakingly prevalent, and we live in challenging times, but challenges bring opportunities for change. And with this recent incident serves as a stark reminder of the pain caused by hatred and prejudice. But it also reminded us of the power we hold when we choose compassion over cruelty. Hatred thrives in silence. Racism and discrimination continue to harm individuals and communities, yet too often they go unchallenged. This incident is a wake-up call, not just to see these injustices, but to act. And I invite you to join me in this conversation about what happened and what we can do to stand against hate, fostering understanding against bias, and promoting inclusivity, confronting inequality and advocating for justice, working towards unity and celebrating diversity, overcoming division and building connections, challenging intolerance and inspiring compassion, hate, prejudice, ignorance, and fear of differences, and racism is a form of discrimination. Racism is a type of discrimination that targets individuals based on their race, ethnicity. Discrimination in general occurs when someone is treated unfairly due to characteristics like gender, religion, age, disability. Racism is an expression of such bias rooted in stereotypes and societal inequalities. Hate has the catalyst, and hate is often the emotional driver behind racism and discrimination, and it fuels actions and attitudes that mean harm or exclude others. When people harbor the hatred towards a group, it can manifest as a discriminatory practice or racist behaviors. Systemic reinforcement. Racism and discrimination can become institutionalized, supported by societal systems and structures. This perpetuates inequality and amplifies hatred by normalizing prejudice within the laws, policies, and cultural norms. Shared consequences, all three lead to the marginalization and oppression. And understanding these connections is essential for addressing the root causes and fostering a culture of equity, empathy, and understanding. Fear and prejudice at the core. Hate often arises from fear. I always like to say to people, though, too, is that fear is something that I guess we should fear in itself, not from people from other walks of life and cultures. Canada is a multi-cultural country. People come from all over the world to find peace and harmony and live in communities and work and play. The only thing you have to fear is fear itself. So the fear in the unfamiliar or ignorance about others. Fear turns into prejudice, unfounded beliefs, or stereotypes about certain groups, which form the foundations for both racism and discrimination. Racism stands from the belief that one race is superior to another, leading to biased attitudes or systemic practices. Discrimination extends beyond race, applying to gender, religion, sexuality, or physical ability. It isn't just about race anymore. White, people think that, whites are the superior race. I just find that absurd, and I find it ridiculous, and I find it offensive. And I'm white, as you can see. These prejudices are often learned. Racism is taught, and that's a fact. These are learned behaviors passed down through generations and are shaped by societal narratives manifesting through discrimination and becomes actions when individuals or systems treat people unfairly based on their identity. Discrimination can't be personal, such as hateful comments, exclusionary behavior, be institutional, such as unequal opportunities in education, in employment, or legal protections, which also leads to homelessness. Discrimination in housing policies historically deprive marginalized groups of a wealth building opportunities. So in jobs, in education, in housing. Building opportunities, perpetuating cycles of inequality, systemic racism, hate embedded in structures. Racism becomes entrenched in institutions, making it seem normal or invisible to those who benefit from it. This systemic racism perpetuates discrimination. And such policies, criminalization of certain racial groups, healthcare disparities, where marginalized communities receive inferior care, systemic hate through policies or practices creates lasting inequalities, compounding discrimination and limiting opportunities. Mutual enforcement, hate fuels individuals and systemic discrimination over time. Discrimination and racism normalized hatred, creating a vicious cycle. And negative experience with discrimination can deepen hatred within affected communities, potentially leading to division between groups. Systemic racism legitimizes bias and intolerance, fostering environmented or hate continues unchecked. And for an example, media representation can perpetuate harmful stereotypes that reinforce racism, shaping public perceptions and further marginalizing targeted groups. The impact cycles of oppression, the interconnections of hate, racism, and discrimination sustain systemic oppression. Individuals experience trauma, reduced opportunities, and diminished well-being. Communities suffer from division, mistrust, and the lack of access to resources like the social services that we offer here in Canada for everyone who is Canadian, who is Indigenous, who is from the Middle East or other parts of the country or other parts of the world. It's a lack of access to the resources. The society as a whole miss out on the innovation and growth that diversity brings, breaking the cycle to address this of interconnected issues. Action is needed at all levels, from the government, at all levels, institutions. Education. Encourage learning about different cultures, histories, and experiences to combat ignorance and foster empathy. And legislation and create policies actively dismantle systemic racism and promote equity. Representation amplify diverse voices in leadership. media, and decision making. Allyship, individuals and communities standing together against hate and discrimination to create a united front for change. This interconnections reveals just how crucial it is to approach hate, racism, and discrimination, not as separate issues, not as separate issues, but as a combined societal challenge that demands a collective, multifaceted response. Thank you for joining me. I hope you're having a good Friday. Now, I know you're just coming on here, and I went through a whole bunch of things about voices for change and challenging racism and discrimination. Now, I'm actually trying something new today. I don't know if this is actually going to work, but actually doing a live YouTube and podcast as well. I hope you can hear me on Podbean. I'm pretty sure you can, and I'm hoping it's it's working on YouTube as well. Hopefully that back loop is working. Just trying something new. So I'm also putting together a short video. I think just an introduction about discrimination as well. That I'm going to do a little bit later today, and that'll be up on YouTube as well. So I'm talking about, reason why I'm bringing this up now today too, because it was only just like a couple weeks ago here in Ontario, the greater Toronto area, where an incident took place in a public setting where an individual of an individual who was Middle Eastern descent was verbally attacked physically, and even to the extent where the individual tried to set the person's hijab on fire. And this is just unacceptable. We don't hear about every single incident that takes place in society or in our workplaces or wherever you are. 2021 is another stark reminder that, hate and discrimination, isn't going away. And that incident in 2021, right here in the city where I reside, of London, Ontario, an individual deliberately ran into a Muslim family, killing 4 members of that family and injuring a boy. That was in June of 2021. It's tragic. And this is why, I really don't think that we even talk about this enough, and what actions can we do? What actions, if you see something happening, things are starting to unfold and someone's being discriminative towards somebody of another race or a gender or the religion or whatever the case may be, the color of their skin, and they're being verbally attacked or maybe even physically, We have a responsibility in society to intervene. It's not pulling out the cell phones and video recording it to put it up onto YouTube. I mean, yeah, people do that. People will video record it, but also, that's evidence for the police. We can intervene to help people. And we can intervene in ways of educating ourselves of why this happens and how it's deeply entrenched, in societal, in institutions. We can stem back all the way, in the mid 1800s, colonialism. Here in Canada, the residential schools. The United States, it was called the Indian schools. And how these children were removed from their families, from their culture, and taken hundreds of miles away and be put into residential schools and to be stripped of their heritage and their culture and their language, to be like a white man. Discrimination, of a race, of a skin color, of a group, the LGBTQ. People with a disability. And again, it is a stark reminder of the work that still needs to be done. And how to explore and how we can rise above hatred and prejudice to build a more inclusive and compassionate society. I, for one, growing up, my father, or our father, always taught us respect and to respect others. It wasn't just about respecting our elders, respecting other people of who they are. Going to grade school, the early 70s, getting into grade 1, getting into grade 2. We had a couple kids who were black in the entire school. If something happened, window got broken or something like that, they got blamed for it. And I myself and my other friends knew damn well they didn't do it. But they were centered out. And they got the blame. Kids being picked on, whether they were indigenous or they were just different. They had a disability. Being bullied. This all stuff still goes on today. And that, we can't deny that because it happens and it still happens and people are still being bullied or being attacked. And like I said earlier too, imagine walking into a room where you're judged not for your words, your actions, or your dreams, but simply for the color of your skin, the language you speak, or the way you look. And like I said, this isn't just someone's story, it's a reality for many. And we can't stay silent in a world striving from equality, and racism and discriminations remain heartbreakingly prevalent. And all the challenges that these people from these diverse communities and those like that they face every single day. I, for one, I mean, even just doing this show, talking about this, you know, is what we need to do. And like I said, I'm putting together a small video that, is just like an introduction to give people some understanding of what hate and discrimination and racism, they all three go hand in hand. And through education and through educating ourselves and trying to educate others on the importance of standing up and taking on these challenges and taking the opportunities for change. I'm, for one, doing that right now, sitting behind this microphone. Like I said too, again, like these stark reminders, the pain caused by hatred and prejudice. But it also reminds us of the power we hold when we choose compassion over cruelty, when the hatred thrives in silence, and the racism and discrimination continue to harm individuals and communities. And that's why, I invite you to have this conversation with your friends and family and coworkers. And what we can do to stand against hate and fostering understanding. To having inclusive and advocating for justice. So you think about that today. And like I said, I hope this is kind of interesting for me today too, because I've never done a YouTube video, which I'm live on there right now. And of course, live on Podbean, and I'm hoping the sound is working together. But I want to thank you this morning for joining me. And I'm sure you got things to do today. I've got some things to do today, and like finishing that video I wanted to get up, and of course other personal things going on. So enjoy the rest of your day, and of course the weekend. And I will be out here tomorrow morning for 8:30 a.m. And thank you for joining me. This is the Truckers Podcast, FYI. Conversations Without Barriers. I'm your host, Doug from Ontario, Canada. Have a good weekend. Thank you.